All right, so we had cooking, one prohibition for cooking meat and milk together. And now we have eating meat and milk together. And this is a long one. All right. He prohibited us from eating meat with milk. And that is his also saying, you shall not cook, etc., a second time, meaning to say the prohibition of eating it. And in Chulin 114b, they said milk and meat, one is lashed for it cooking and lashed for its eating. And in the Gemara Makos, they said one who cooks a sciatic nerve in milk on a holiday and eats it is lashed 5 sets of lashes. So you have the Gid Hanosha, that's what they're calling sciatic nerve, the Gid Hanosha. So the Gid Hanosha is wearing 2 hats. It's wearing the hat of Gid Hanosha, but it's also wearing the hat of meat. So you are if you cook it, you have cooked meat with milk because it has the status of meat. So you've transgressed cooking meat and milk. And then if you eat it, you have eaten meat and milk. So you've cooked meat and milk, you've eaten meat and milk. You've also,
why are we saying that you cook it? Is there milk in there?
it says one who cooks a sciatic nerve in milk. Yeah, he cooks it in milk.
Why don't you just cook it in water or whatever?
It just happens. The guy's cooking it.
All
I
right.
don't know. He's making a special dish, and it requires sciatic nerve and milk. So he's transgressed cooking meat and milk. He's transgressed eating meat and milk, and he's transgressed eating the sciatic nerve. Plus, he's transgressed cooking on a holiday. Now, even though you're regularly allowed to cook on a holiday, you're only allowed to cook food for the holiday. And since this is food that you can't eat, you wouldn't get the regular dispensation that you get for cooking on a holiday. So he's transgressed that. So that is 4. He cooked it in milk on a holiday and eats it. So how is he getting 5? On account of eating a sciatic nerve, that's 1. On account of cooking on a holiday, that's 2. On account of cooking meat and milk, that's 3. On account of eating meat and milk, that's 4. Oh, and on account of kindling a fire, that is 5. And there they said, remove kindling and insert the use of consecrated wood, the prohibition of which is from here, and their tree gods you shall not burn. There was an issue because lighting a fire is just a completely separate action. The truth is, they make it sound like this is one action, but really this is cooking and eating. But then lighting the fire in the process, you could include all sorts of things. You include chopping the wood. You can include, so at some point, they would have to cut it off. So let's say they just kept it with the cooking and eating. You could still get 5 if you used consecrated wood in the cooking of it, because, and what does it mean, consecrated wood? It means it was dedicated to be wood in the Beis Hamikdash, used in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's remove kindling and insert the use of consecrated, a prohibition of which is from here, and their tree gods you shall not burn in fire. You shall not do so to the Lord your God. And in the Gemara and Chulin, they said the Torah expressed eating with a term of cooking, so that like if he cooked, he is lashed. He is also lashed for eating. And in the second chapter of Psachim, they said, because of this, did the Torah not write about eating meat with milk explicitly to say that we will give lashes for it even when it's consumed, not according to the way it's enjoyment. So what if you eat it? Let's see here. How I don't remember all of this. I mean, I remember that we had this discussion, but I don't remember all the details here. Yeah, so you'd have to eat it in a way that you are not getting no, you're not doing it in a normal way of getting pleasure. So I don't remember what the scenario is over there. The scenario might be that you swallow it. You don't chew it. You don't chew it, you just swallow it. Or um, if you're not hungry and you end up eating it when you're not hungry. I'm not sure what the scenario is, but it's important for some reason to say that you would be liable even if you're not getting benefit from it. Um, okay. The Torah expressed eating with the term of cooking so that, like if he cooked, he is lashed, he's also lashed for eating. And in the second chapter of Psachim, they said, because of this, did the Torah not write about eating meat with milk explicitly to say that we give lashes for it even when consumed, not according to its way of enjoyment. And remember this, and here it is appropriate for me to note an important principle that I have not yet mentioned. This is already number 187 in the negative commandments. That's after 248 positive commandments. So we've had 335 commandments already, and he is telling us something that he's never told us before. And that is his saying, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk 3 times. And the teachers have said that each one of the negative statements is for a specific content. And they said one is for eating in Chulin 115b, one is for cooking, and one is for benefit. So, for instance, you can't sell the product of meat and milk. You can, so let's say you wanted to have, you just wanted to be a purveyor of cheeseburgers, even though let's say Gentiles are going to eat it, so it's not forbidden for them to eat it. And let's say you had Gentiles cook it, so nobody did anything wrong cooking it, and nobody is doing anything wrong eating it. But the very fact that you're the one who's selling it is a prohibition. So cooking it is prohibited, eating it is prohibited, and benefiting from it is prohibited. But the questioner will ask and say, for what reason did you count the prohibition of its eating and its cooking as 2 commandments, yet you do not count the prohibition of its benefit as a separate commandment? So we had a previous 186 was cooking it, 187 is eating it, but there is no 188 is not getting benefit from it. There are 3 separate prohibitions. It says, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk 3 separate times, one for eating, one for cooking, and one for getting benefit from it. And yet the Rambam is saying, I'm only counting 2. Why am I only counting 2, the cooking and the eating, and not counting getting benefit? The questioner should know that it is inappropriate to count its benefit as a separate commandment, since it and its eating are the same matter. Is that true? Typically, eating is getting benefit, is it? if I eat it, I am getting benefit from it. I'm getting nutritional value. I'm getting flavor. I'm getting rid of my hunger. So I am getting actual benefit from eating it. That's one kind of benefit. This is also covering selling it though, and things like that. But there are elements of it. So if that's the case, then why mention it separately? And his saying about something that is forbidden to eat is indeed one of several examples of benefit. But the intention is that he not benefit from it, not by eating, nor by anything else. So again, not being able to sell it for profit. Whenever it is stated, you shall not eat, it shall not be eaten, or it shall not be eaten, both a prohibition of eating and a prohibition of benefit are implied. Until the verse specifies that one may benefit in the manner that it is specified with regard to a carcass. So it does say that you are not allowed to eat a dead, let's say a cow that died without proper shechita, which we call a nevela. They're translating it here as carcass. So a nevela, again, it's a cow that wasn't properly shechted, so it's a non-kosher, it's not kosher meat. That technically I could sell it. I'm not supposed to have a business with non-kosher foods in general. That's another issue. But technically, according to the Torah, I could sell nevela, but I cannot sell basar v'chalav. Why do I know I can sell nevela? Because the Torah actually said that I can get benefit from it. As Scripture explained the use of that, and that is his saying, you may give it to a resident alien who's within your gates that he may eat it. And according to this principle, it is inappropriate to count the prohibition of eating and benefit as two commandments. And if we had counted them as two commandments with meat and milk, it would have likewise been appropriate with chametz, with orla, which is the fruit of trees during the first 3 years, and with forbidden mixtures of a vineyard. That's what we call kalaim. So if you mixed some other vegetable or fruit product with your vineyard, each one of them would have had to be two commandments if the prohibition of benefit is its own commandment. But since these were not counted, the benefit from those is never counted, but rather only the negative commandment of eating alone was counted, and the prohibition of benefit was included in that prohibition. The same should occur regarding with meat and milk. So even though, again, they specify in the Gemara that each one of those times that it says you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk, it says it 3 times. One is the prohibition of eating, one is the prohibition of cooking, one is the prohibition of getting benefit. Eating and getting benefit are related. There are
Rabbi, if you enjoy your meal,
yeah,
does that mean benefit?
yeah. And that's what they're saying. So that's
And
one kind of benefit.
so what
There's an
about if you said it, you said if you were brave enough to tell your wife, this didn't taste really good. This didn't
right,
really taste so good.
right.
Now you're not getting benefit?
Well, then somebody might argue you're still getting nutritional benefit. Let's say there was something wrong with it. Let's say it was uh there was something it was left out or something, and you ate it, and then you vomited it. It made you sick and you vomited it. That might be closer to your example. Because otherwise, again, if you said I didn't like the taste, that may not be enough.
How about if you said you're eating fish and you there's bones all over the place. You're sitting there pulling out bones which should have been removed by the
Right. So it's annoying, but somebody would still say you're getting the benefit because after you eat it, you're not going to be hungry. After you eat it, you'll get the nutrition from it. So somebody could still argue there was benefit there.
I know, but to
Yes,
me
it
that
was
sounds like
annoying. It is annoying,
to
but
me it sounds like, eating and benefit are the same. You mean if you eat it, you're going to get some form of benefit.
right.
Why
So
would those be
benefit
two
could be
separate things? It should be one thing.
right. So that's going to be he's saying that for the purposes of benefit, if I just had eating, I would have thought that it's only eating it that is prohibited. Now, now when they stress that you can't get benefit, that's going to include other ways of getting benefit, like selling it. So that would be or giving it as a gift to
That sounds,
somebody. So
yeah,
those are another way of getting benefit.
right.
So that's why I need to know. But he's saying since technically I could deduce from the fact that you can't eat it that you can't get benefit from it, even though you'd have your question, which is how do I know that it's more if I know from eating it that it's all kinds of benefit, then I don't need to be told that separately that you can't get benefit from it. So somehow I would be confused if I was just told you can't eat it. I would know that you can't get benefit, but I wouldn't know perhaps how far that goes. I don't know. It is confusing. I agree.
I mean, I know it's confusing, but the worst part about it is that from what you're saying, the ultimate would be if they did make it two things, that would mean two sets of lashes, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of lashes.
Yes, I know.
And so
And
I don't even know
and
how
that would
to
be
do the
just
first
for
set.
eating. You're saying just for eating alone, it should be two sets of lashes, one for eating and one for getting benefit. Right. Every time. Every time you ate it,
I know that's a
you
lot.
would get two lashes. Yeah.
That's a lot of lashes.
Well, here they started by saying there's a case where you could end up with five sets of
I
lashes.
know. I know.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not sure a
Yeah.
person can tolerate five sets of lashes, unless they did
Right.
spaghetti doodles.
Right. Or what could happen is that what what they did was they had doctors who would
And it,
study the person and tell them um, how many lashes they think they will be able to take and still remain safe. And then they would be present to make sure that the person is safe while they're being lashed, um, so that they don't die from it. Um, so it's possible they wouldn't receive the whole 39, but I hear it. I know it's a lot of lashes. I agree. Um,
particularly if you don't like the guy.
right. But also,
That was a joke.
oh, yeah, I get it. But also, the thing is that he's getting a lot of lashes for making and eating a cheeseburger, like five sets of lashes for making and eating a cheeseburger. But that's what he's getting. Okay. On Yom Tov with the Gita Nasha. Uh, and possibly using wood that was consecrated. Okay. So it says, all right, so now again it said, for what purpose did scripture need a negative statement about meat and milk to forbid its benefit? As we explained, behold, the answer is that is needed for regarding this because it is not written, do not eat from this. It says don't cook it. It doesn't say do not eat from it. We're learning eating, but if it had said do not eat it, then I would not need the benefit part. But it actually did not say do not eat it. It says do not cook it three times. So I'm learning cooking, eating, and getting benefit.
Wait a minute.
If it had said do not eat it directly, then the Rambam's saying I would have deduced that you can't get benefit from it.
So Rabbi, just remind me, I'm sort of a little mixed up, but I'm saying, is it in the Torah that says, it says you can't cook it, but does it say you can't eat it too?
No, but it
That,
says you can't cook it 3 times.
what's that mean?
So, in other words, it says, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk in the Torah portion of Mishpatim. It says, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk in the Torah portion of,
Oh, all
I
right.
think, and maybe in Emor and also
Sharon's.
probably in Kisiso. It says it 3 different times. So each one, why does it repeat it 3 times? So the Gemara is saying it's repeating it 3 times to tell us that there are actually 3 different infractions possible, one for eating, one for cooking, one for getting benefit. If it had said, do not eat a kid that was cooked in its mother's milk, then I would not need the third uh the third one, because if it said do not cook it and eat it, then I would know two, and from the do not eat it part, I would also infer the third one about benefit. But since it didn't say it that way, um, I need the Gemara is saying we needed it 3 times.
Rabbi, can you cook a kid in chicken soup? That's okay?
Yeah, you can cook it in other words, you can cook it in you could cook a kid in as long as it's pareve or fleischiks, you can cook it in anything as long as it's pareve or fleischiks. So,
And they,
for instance, technically, you could cook the meat of the kid with the meat of its mother. No, you could have a pot with a stew, let's say, and you have meat of the kid and meat of its mother in the same stew pot. So you could cook the kid in its mother's meat, but you can't cook the kid in its mother's milk.
mm-hmm. What? Okay.
We doesn't It doesn't give an explanation in the Torah. Rabbi Becher the other day gave an explanation. There's several different people who take a shot at it, take a guess at what the rationale is. So one is that there's an absurdity in cooking this kid in milk because uh, the milk is is there to give it life, and you're
What is milk
you're eating it
from the breast?
because it's dead. So like you're eating the meat on the one hand, and there is milk, which is the essence. It's like life-giving elixir for the goat, and it's somehow that combination is outrageous, to the Torah. Again, this is just an attempt at giving the rationale. It's a chok. We don't have it. And also, even though it says in its mother's milk, it's also forbidden to cook goat in cow's milk. So, and it's not just
Where's the
goat,
milk coming from? Is from the breasts, teats, or is it in
of the
the
goat.
stomach? Is it in the stomach or
No,
teat?
no. It's milk. It's regular milk coming from the teats. It's let's say in a jug. You're making a dish. Like this happens to be, if you look up like cultural Lebanese dishes. I'm just gonna do it for you. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna go to Perplexity here. I'm gonna go, can you list five
That's what I want for.
five cultural favorites?
Because
Cultural food favorites, I have to say,
what I was
food.
the
Cultural food favorites of the Lebanese.
They eat a lot of yogurt, right?
Yeah, so that's how they usually make it. But let's just see what it says here. I'm taking a big.
The yogurt.
Oh, they gave hummus, tabbouleh, falafel, shawarma, and kibbeh. Those are now I need. How do I need to say this then? A follow up, cooked, more elaborate, cooked foods. Ah, I got myself stuck here. Nah, I did not. I should not have made this. Anyways, I have seen this. Like even there was some guy who was um Lebanese and he was like in Saudi Arabia and he was pointing out that they have these Lebanese restaurants and he was eating this dish which was goat in yogurt. Goat and yogurt. And he touted it as, like a traditional Lebanese meal. And then I unrelated to it was watching some uh clip of a guy who was like on I don't know if it was the Emirates airline or one of the Arab airlines that is really luxurious, and he was in first class, and he also had that served to him, and he mentioned it as a classic Lebanese dish. So that's most likely the way they're having it, with as as with yogurt or Lebanese. It could be why it's called Leban. I wonder if that's true.
Lavan.
Yeah, but I wonder if Leban is related. And this is my one last thing here.
This is a tough subject.
Yeah, part of it is because it is a chok. It is a law that's given without a an explanation. Is Leban
I'm not picking it up.
yogurt named after Lebanon? Leban is a fermented milk product popular in Lebanon and across the Middle East. The name Leban comes from the Arabic word for white and is not directly named after Lebanon. So Sam is correct. Though the country is within the Levant region, where Leban is a staple. In Lebanon and neighboring countries, Leban typically refers to thick yogurt-like fermented milk enjoyed at any meal. The term is used across many Arabic-speaking countries. While Lebanon is one of them, the product itself is not named specifically after Lebanon, but rather for its color and method of preparation. So Sam, our linguist, has it. Okay. So,
Rabbi,
yeah.
thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
By the way, okay, so we have three times, but mother is also in those three times. Where does the general prohibition of milk and meat?
Comes
Other,
from there. Yeah. So the
well,
question is,
but
how do they know that?
yeah, I mean,
Right. Yeah. So you would think that they would need at least one of those to tell you that this applies. Like, so you're saying that if I had those three and I knew that each one's telling me something different, I would say the first one's telling me about a goat in its mother's milk. The next one's telling me it doesn't have to be goat. And the one after that's telling me it doesn't have to be its mother's milk, but it could be any milk, something like that. How do they just jump to the notion that we're talking about any kosher meat with any kosher milk. How do they jump to that? Because that is a big jump. All right. If he doesn't talk about it, it doesn't
Chicken
look
is an
like it's-
even bigger jump, but that's another
Now,
story.
chicken is not biblical.
Right. No, I
Chicken
know
is
that.
that's why,
know.
because chickens don't have mother's milk. That's why birds are not. That's how they know birds are not included in it biblically, because birds don't have mother's milk.
Right.
Right.
But-
So it has to be a meat that has a mother's milk. It clearly doesn't have to be its mother. It doesn't even have to be its species. So your question is, how did they get to that? It doesn't have to be goat. It could be cow or sheep or deer or bison or moose. I once read an article about a guy who made kosher moose milk. Kosher moose milk. Apparently moose do not produce a lot of milk. And therefore kosher moose milk. I think what he had, not the milk, he made cheese from it. So there you needed even a larger quantity. And so it was cost prohibitive to market such a thing. But anyways, it is theoretically possible. So all those would be forbidden with milk. And yet, how do they get there? They just jump right to there. Okay. We've already mentioned the reason for which the eating of milk was not mentioned. For anything about which it mentions eating is only liable when the throat derives enjoyment from it. However, if he opens his mouth and swallows what is forbidden, or it is so hot as to burn his throat, he's exempt, except for meat and milk, about which one is liable for its eating, even if you don't derive enjoyment from it, as we mentioned. And likewise is the case with forbidden mixtures of the vineyard, as we explain in negative 193. And understand all this principle and remember them, and the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in chapter 8 of Chulin. Okay, so that is the big question we have that we're left with is, how did they make that huge jump? Okay, so now let's see if something comes up. All right, so the Torah forbids
You're right.
cooking, eating, getting benefit from meat and milk learned from the repetition of the verse about not cooking kid in mother's milk. There we go. But how do they know it applies to all forms of kosher milk and not just goat's milk or other forms?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
it just occurred to me, perhaps they associated milk, all milk, with mothers because they saw all milk coming from mothers, and therefore the whole category of milk became different than meat.
But it says the actual wording is do not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Right, right.
It
Well,
doesn't
they
say
had to make a
b'chalav
jump.
aim. It doesn't say mother's milk. It's its mother's
Its
milk.
mother's, right, right. Because that's even worse.
Right.
To the its mother. Right.
Right. Right. That would be the extreme example. But so that just that jump, we want to know, wouldn't you want to apply these verses to that? I mean, I would think that before you run off and start applying it to let's say eating and getting benefit, that you spent those verses figuring out that it applies to any kosher meat or any and any kosher milk. The Hebrew word gedi is understood by the sages as a prototype for all domesticated kosher mammals. The Talmud of Chulin reasons that the verse uses gedi as a common example, not a limitation, since the practice of cooking a kid in its mother's milk was widespread in ancient times. Thus, the prohibition applies to any meat from domesticated kosher mammals cooked with any milk from kosher mammals. This is codified in Jewish law, where the mixture of such meat and milk is forbidden for cooking. All right. The verse appears 3 times in the Torah, leading the sages to derive 3 distinct prohibitions: cooking, eating, deriving benefit. The repetition implies a broader scope, as the prohibitions are not tied exclusively to goats. Non-goat meat and milk. The Torah prohibition does not apply to non-kosher animals. However, rabbinic law forbids mixing fowl or wild game with milk to prevent confusion as observers. The sages interprets mother milk as any kosher milk, not exclusively from the same species. Just why not limit to goats? The oral tradition given alongside the written Torah at Mount Sinai clarifies that the verse's wording is exemplary and not exclusive. As the Talmud emphasizes the prohibition's ethical core, avoiding cruelty, maintaining spiritual boundaries applies universally to all kosher mammals. Yeah, it doesn't. So far, Perplexity has not given us. It just essentially what Perplexity is saying is they just felt right away that this was just a prototype. They didn't feel they needed to learn that. They did not need to learn that. That to them was obvious. That is obvious.
And we're left perplexed. Nebuchim.
Why don't we always go to the old standby? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai.
Oh,
What do you mean always?
when you can't explain.
When you say always, be a little more specific. What do you mean?
When you've exhausted every other possible resource.
Well, here's the thing. They don't say this. I mean, it doesn't, as far as I know, this question is not overtly asked and answered with that answer.
Yeah, well, then maybe the question that it was never asked because it was halacha l'Moshe Sinai, which nobody questions.
Right. It's possible. Right. It's possible. Or it's just possible that from
Sure.
context, they understood it at the time. Right. But I know, I agree. It's an answer of last resort, but we see them stretching when it comes to, finding these 3 verses, they like broaden it to eating and getting benefit. It's not just cooking. So that they felt they needed to show through the verses. And for some reason, this they didn't feel they need to show from verses. And the question is, why not? But I'm saying, if you fall back on oral law, then why you could easily have oral law for cooking and getting benefit from,
Right.
kind of thing also. All right, let's think about
Usually
this.
when a
Yeah.
law, usually when a law in general is repeated over, it's because people are not following it. This was done a lot.
It could be, yeah, it could be. Like the many times it talks about taking interest with loans,
Uh,
things like that. That's repeated many times. Yeah. I mean, the bug thing was repeated several times for different kinds of bugs. Yeah. So, but here the thing is, it's repeated. They've decided why it was repeated, but in other words, they decided those needed to be written about, but the other things don't. Yeah, don't. All right, I'm going to go answer the door. It's been great. I say we do this again tomorrow.